Let me guess, you're writing a script and you just can't figure out why some of your scenes suck. Well, you're in luck, because today I'm going to go through the common pitfalls in screenwriting that can ruin any scene and any script. If you're new to Standard Story Company, my name's Kent Lamb. I've been a filmmaker for 20 years, since I was a little kid. I made a no-budget feature film that went viral, and more recently I made a short film that also went viral and played at festivals around the world. And my major at USC was fiction writing, so I may not be Aaron Sorkin, but these are universally considered good guidelines to follow for screenwriting, and they've saved me countless times from making a lot of bad scenes in movies. And definitely stick around till the end. I'm going to talk about the biggest thing that, as I've grown as a filmmaker, it's become the #1 thing that I focus on when a scene isn't working. All right, so #1, and this one is so fundamental. You need to start your scene as late as possible and end it as soon as possible. A very common mistake with novice filmmakers and writers is that they want to show you everything. The audience is smarter than that, and they just don't have patience for that. So you need to show them the bare minimum to get your point across. It makes it more engaging for the viewer and keeps the momentum of the film going. So I'll give you an example from one of my own short films right here on my channel. It's called The Flash Drive Part 3. There's this interrogation scene right before the climax of the film. This character Alex is tied up and he's trying to convince this other character, Officer Mocha, not to kill him.
I don't want to do this, Alex. You know what I'm gonna have to do? I'm gonna have to take the saw over here and make you fit into these 3 duffel bags. Hey, look at the bags! I'm gonna have to see you in those bags, Alex.
Officer Mocha, by the way, played by Lanny June, who you may recognize from Baby Driver. What up, Lanny?
How's that working out for you?
Who doesn't like hats?
Anyway, at the end, he decides not to kill him. So shouldn't the end of the scene be him making a decision? In this case, if we had shown him make the decision, it would have completely dropped the tension and it would have really hurt the pacing. I mean, what are you gonna do? Show him untie him, let him go, give him a butt slap on the way out the door? All of that stuff's completely unnecessary. Instead, we showed him on the cusp of making the decision. He could kill him, he could not, and then we cut away. And we cut to a shot of a doorknob. And then finally, the Alex character opens the door and we realize he made the decision to let him go. So by ending the scene earlier, it kept the tension high, kept the viewer on the edge of their seat, and it immediately propelled us into the next scene and the next conflict. And actually, that next scene is a great counterexample to the point I just made. So the next scene, he slowly walks through the kitchen, he slowly walks around the corner, and confronts the final bad guy of the film. So you could say, Kent, why didn't you just start with him confronting the bad guy if you're trying to start scenes as late as possible? Well, in this case, it's an exception to the rule because this is the climax of these 3 films. So obviously, I want to milk that tension for everything it's worth. I want every beat to be building the suspense of this moment. So while you should definitely try to start your scenes as late as possible and end them as soon as possible, you should never do that if it's going to be at the expense of really juicy, emotional beats in your film that you're going to be cutting out. Okay, so the next point, this one is so fundamental, and that is your scene might just lack conflict. If you have a scene where it's more about an exposition dump, just getting a bunch of information out that you need to set up other things that are going to happen in the movie, that's not an excuse to avoid conflict and drama. You need to make it interesting. And in fact, conflict is the best way to get exposition across because it makes it more engaging and more believable. In general, characters should never give up valuable information easily. They should have to work for it. Just like in real life, if somebody asks you how your day is, you're not going to just start volunteering a bunch of information. You're going to say,
I'm having panic attacks, all right? The other night I thought I was having a fucking heart attack. I puked in a trash barrel on the way over here. I haven't slept for weeks.
It's going fine and you're going to move on with your life. So if you're going to have them give this information over, it should be earned. And the best way to earn it is through conflict. So here's an example of a scene that's not working because it lacks conflict. A guy's girlfriend wants him to go to the pool party. He won't go. She asks why. He says, I can't swim. She asks, why can't you swim? He says, when I was 5, my dad drowned at sea and I've never gone in the water since. Boring. That's a boring scene, and you know why? It's because there's no conflict, and he's just giving out this backstory, all this exposition like candy at Halloween. She's not working for it at all. So a way to fix that scene might be to do something like this. She asks if he'll go to the pool party. He says he will not. She asks why. He says, I'm working on my car today. She says, you care more about the car than you care about me. He starts defending himself. The fight escalates and she says, if you care about me, then why won't you just come to this little pool party? And then finally he drops it like a bomb, because I can't swim. That's a much more engaging version of the same scene for the viewer. You're getting conflict. It's much more realistic. I wouldn't even give that father drowning at sea exposition yet. I would save that. It's too juicy. So maybe later in the film, she works harder for it, she earns it, and it just plays better. So again, to reiterate, if your scene's feeling boring, if it feels like you're just getting exposition across, but nothing interesting is happening, inject conflict into the scene. Conflict is engaging to the viewer. Okay, so moving down the checklist, the next thing you might be doing is providing more information than the audience actually needs. Audiences can infer a lot more than you might think, so you really don't want to over-explain. It's just going to slow things down and make them feel like they're being talked down to. A lot of times you can replace like 5 clunky lines of dialogue with just one reaction or expression from an actor. And if that's the option, you should always do that. So here's an example from another one of my short films. This is Will the Machine. It's about a football player who's got some emotional problems, and his coaches sit him down and give him a stern talking to about some of his behavior that they don't like. Now, when we first shot this scene, this had way more information about the coaches than it did in the final version of the film. We had this exchange where the coach tells Will that he has a job offer for coaching a college team, and that Will's behavior is putting that opportunity in jeopardy for him. And it wasn't until I got to the editing room that I realized that this was all extraneous information. Even once we cut out that backstory from the coach, we already had all that information that we needed. So we just overwrote it and we just gave the audience too much information. That said, as a director, sometimes it's helpful to give your actor that backstory that will help guide their performance and make it a little more specific. But there's a world of difference between a supporting actor knowing where he's coming from versus the audience knowing where that actor came from. If that information isn't important to the story, then get rid of it. All right, next on the checklist, your scene has no subtext. This is one of my favorite things to write in dialogue. If your scene has no subtext and it's only about the literal surface level conversation that the characters are having, it's gonna feel flat and boring. On the flip side though, when your characters are saying just as much without words as they are with words, your scene can really pop off the page and be much more interesting to watch in the final film. Here's another example from Will the Machine, the water break scene.
I think I started Godwin on Monday.
Yeah, Godwin.
Yeah.
That's my school.
Cool. How do you like it? How are the kids?
Our whole line is weak this year. Our defense is going to leave us really vulnerable. I'll make do, though.
Right.
On the surface, they're just talking about school and football, but beneath that, they're having two very different conversations. Joe is saying, can we be friends?
Hey man, I'm getting hungry. You want to grab a bite to eat?
Will is saying, can we be rivals? Can you make me better at football?
Let's go again.
And from watching this film play at festivals, I think the audience really sees the subtext in that scene, and that's what made that scene work so well. This next one's really easy to miss, and that's just the pacing is off. The scenes before or after your scene can really make it feel too slow or too fast. For example, if you have 4 quarter-page scenes really quick and then a 3-page monologue right after that, it's going to feel like the pace just hit a wall, came to a dead stop. You do really need to be thinking about the rhythm that you're setting with your film, which is going to be determined by your scene lengths throughout your script. For example, here's a situation I've run into with features. Let's say you have a big dialogue scene, it's like 4 pages long, and you're really worried that the momentum of the movie is just completely dropping off here. Well, if you really can't make that scene any shorter, a good trick you can do is just make the next scene a 1/4 page long. Make the scene after that a 1/2 page long. What you're doing is rebuilding that pace by starting with some really fast stuff after the slow stuff. Finally, the most important one to me, the one that as I've grown as a filmmaker, I've more and more come to realize that this is just the fundamental essence of being a good storyteller, and that is momentum. Is your scene adding to the momentum of the story that you're telling? In every sense of the word, is your scene moving the story forward? Even something as innocuous as returning to a previous location that you've already used in the movie can subconsciously to the viewer feel like the story is moving backwards now. So you always have to keep that in mind. Does this scene make the story feel like you're barreling ahead into new territory, or does it feel like you're now retreating back to familiarity? And I'm not talking about your character arcs. Characters are always going to have setbacks and obstacles that push them back. But when they come back, that needs to be under different circumstances, with a new outlook. Everything needs to change as much as possible. If you have any kind of redundancy in your movie, it's death. It's absolute death. And if we start to stall or slow down, that's when we notice that we're watching a movie. But a good storyteller keeps the momentum going in a smooth, straight line ahead to the point where you don't even recognize that you're watching a movie anymore. Everything is constantly developing, constantly changing, constantly moving into new territory, different circumstances. You're hypnotized by the film. So I hope these were helpful, but these aren't the only pitfalls you need to watch out for with your writing. In fact, if you want to watch my video on short film cliches, the actual subject matter of your scene could be the reason it's not working out so great. So definitely give that video a watch. Don't forget to thumbs up and subscribe if you found any of this useful, and I'll be seeing you next week with more, hopefully from my new office.
Did you see the memo about this?